Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pre-Algebra Chapter 2, Lesson 11, or 2.11. Today we are talking about area. So what is area? Area, simply defined, is the space that it takes to cover or fill a two-dimensional shape. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, let's say, for example, that we are talking about this square here. Now, I know my drawings aren't as straight as they could be, but let's see, it's this square here, right? And let's imagine that this square is a garden. And I might ask you, what is the area of the garden? Well, what I'm really asking you is, what would it take to fill completely all the space within the garden, right? How much would it take? Well, we have language for talking about that. And what we talk about are called square units. Now, first we got to figure out, well, what's a unit? We know what a square is, right? That's a shape or polygon that has four sides of equal length, right? So let's say this is 3, then that means all the side lengths are 3. So that's a square, but what are units? Well, units are measures or lengths of measures, right? So you know some units. Some units could be inches, feet, yards, meters, miles, anything that covers distance, right? So the question is, what is a square unit? Well, like I said, it has to do with squares, but we have to imagine the squares we are talking about only have a side length of 1, right? Each side length is 1. So this is literally one square unit. It is a singular square unit. And the question is really, for area, is how many of these little squares would it take to fill, well, if I drew each square more accurately, right, or more evenly, how many one square units would it take to fill the entirety of this garden? So you got to imagine every single square is the exact same length, right? What that means is this is 1, this is 1, this is 1, this is 1, this is 1. Each length is 1, right? And if you counted all these, you would say, well, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, right? There are 25 squares units, or 25 square units it would take to cover that entire garden area. Now, that's the concept behind what area is. Now let's talk about the math of how to figure that out, okay? So in reality, what are we looking at? What we're really looking at is if we had that exact same garden and we were given some of the lengths, right? Let's say we were given rather that this was, I don't know, 4 yards long. So which means each side length had to also be 4 yards long. 4 yards there, 4 yards there, 4 yards there. And the question is, how many 1 yard squares would it take to fill in this garden completely? So what do I know? I know that I'm dealing with squares that on each side are 1 yard. And there's the abbreviation for yard, YD. And I'm going to see how many of these squares will it take to fill in, right? Well, if we know that one of these side lengths is 1 yard, so let's say it's 1 yard like this, right? We can say, hold on, if this is 1 yard, they've told us how many yards go across, and that's 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to draw that a little bit more precise, so give me a second. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And each of these is 1 yard, because we're going to create squares with each of these. And then how far down does it go? Well, it goes down 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards. How do I know that? Well, it told me that the width was 4 yards down and 4 yards across. So this is one square yard. This is another. This is 2 square yards, 3 square yards, 4 square yards. So far, I have 4 square yards. This is another one. This is another one. This is another one. There's the other one. So now I have 8 square yards. Then I finish it out. Let's see how many total square yards I have. Count with me. I have 1 square yard, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It would take 16 squares, a yard in area, to fill this entire garden. Another way you could have done that is you could have multiplied this length times this width. This was the length, it was 4 yards, and you could have multiplied it by the width. In fact, the equation for area is length times width, or base times height. Both of those would give you the area. Now, in this case, the units were yards, right? So your final answer is, it would take 16 yards squared, right? Or 16, another way to say that is 16 square yards. Because each of these little boxes is a square, because each of their sides is 1 yard. And we call that a square yard, right? 1 yard squared. How many of those did it take to fill this garden? 16 square yards. And the way we write that is 16 square yards, or 16 yards squared. All right, let's try another problem. Let's say I had a rectangle. And this rectangle had 1, 2, 3, 3 across, 3 units for the length, and 1, 2, 2 units for the width. And I asked you, what is the area of this rectangle? Area of rectangle. Well, you might say to yourself, okay, how many square units does it take to fill this square or this rectangle? And it takes, you can just count them, right? It takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There you go. 6 unit squared, or 6 square units. And that square is right there. Remember your exponents. Now, another way you could do this is simply by multiplying the length times the width, or the base times the height. That is also acceptable for area. A means area. So the area is the length times the width. So let's see. What is the length? The length is 3 right here, multiplied by the width, which is 2 units right there. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 square units. Now, if we were doing base times height, we might also say, well, look, what is the base length of this object? This rectangle has a base down here of 1, 2, 3. And it has a height up here of 1, 2. Base times height is the same thing as 3 times 2 in this case. Therefore, we have 6 square units. So remember, you could either count the number of squares in a shape, or you could simply multiply the height or the width times the base or the length. Let's try another one. I'd like you to write this down in your notebook if you're following along. All right, let's say I have this rectangle. And this one is 14 meters, and that's the width, how wide it is. And then how long it is 19 meters. What is the area of this rectangle? Well, the simplest way to do that is to say, okay, the equation is the one length times one width. Well, what's the length? The length is, I'll draw it in a different color, 19 meters. So I put 19 meters here, multiplied by the width. And what's the width? It's right here, 14 meters. So I have my units, meters, right? M equals meters. And now all I need to do is multiply 19 times 14 to get me my area. So let's go over here. 19 multiplied by 14. That's going to be 4 times 9, which is 36. Drop the 3, put this 3, drop the 6, put the 3 up there. 4 times 1 is 4. 4, 5, 6, 7. Bring down a 0 as a placeholder. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 1 is 1. Add them together. 6 plus 0 is 6. 7 plus 9 is 16. 1 plus 1 is 2. There's your answer, 266. And the question is 266 what? Cats, dogs, ferrets? No, 266 meters, right? Or 266 m. And remember, when we're using area, it's always squared because the shape that we use to measure these are the squares. They are 266 meters squared. That's how many small little boxes it would take, 1 meter across and 1 meter long. It would take 266 of these little squares to fill this rectangle. So we say it's 266 meters squared. That is the area of this rectangle. Let's try one more just for safety. All right, so here's our last one. All right, I'm going to have another rectangle. Its base is 20 feet. Its height is 16 feet. What is the area of this rectangle? Well, it's a simple answer after all. We remember that area is either length times width, or in this case, base multiplied. Let me draw it another way for you. We could just simply do base times height, right? So what is my base? My base is 20 feet. And what is my height? 16 feet. And what do I need to do now? All I need to do is multiply them. So I'm going to do 20 times 16. Let's see what we get. 16 times 0, or sorry, 16 times 0. 6 times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. 6 times 2 is 12. So I write the 1 and the 2 here. I drop a 0 for a placeholder, and then I go 1 times 0, 0. 1 times 2 is 2. Then I add these two together because there's no more numbers. 0 plus 0 is 0. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. And sure enough, it would take 320 square feet to fill this entire area. It would take 320 to fill this entire area. And how do I write that as my answer? I write that as 320, then I put the units, feet, then I put the square on top. 320 feet squared. Because really what this looks like is 320 feet by feet, right? Because it's 1 foot by 1 foot. But you don't really need to know that right now. All you need to know is that it's 320 feet squared. How did I do that? I simply multiplied the base times the height. All right, so let's review for today. Today we learned about area. We learned that area is how many squares does it take to fill up a rectangle or any shape. We also learned that the equation for area is A is equal to the length times the height, or L times H, or sorry, not L times H, length times width, or base times height. Now, it doesn't really matter which one you think is the length and which way you think is the height. This could be the length because it's usually longer, and then this could be the width, or vice versa. This could be the base, and this could be the height. As long as you multiply them together, you will find the area to fill in the entire shape. All right, I hope that helped. We will see you in the next video.